Howdy ho, friends and foes of month. Welcome to Dad's on Life, your weekly episodic show. And parents, well, not quite weekly episodic show. It's been a while. Um, on parenting from a male perspective. I'm your host, Jay Miles, and with me, as always, my co-host Keith Bogan,
Who are you?
Chad Holloway,
Good to see you guys finally.
and Dave Duesenberg.
We're back, baby.
So I can't even tell you the last time we recorded. It was definitely
3 months ago?
It feels like a year ago.
I
Uh-oh.
want to say October. It's so far back
well
that
in
Jason Pros.
the end of 2024, but
hmm
um. So Keith is going to introduce the topic here, and Keith.
Why did I get so lucky? Hold on a second here. I want to read exactly what I wrote. I came up with this topic a while back, and then there was all sorts of trash that these boys were talking about. So I'm kind of there we go. So,
You just reposted it yesterday. You can't be that far back.
I did, and then
Yeah.
you talk more trash, So
You forget that we're old.
yes, exactly. So the topic was showing our kids how to make good, genuine connections with their friends, which is something that, and again, I think we've all shown a great respect for genders here. We're not talking about, there is a difference between how moms do it versus how dads do it, but it's not, one is not better than the other. There's the difference. And I love to explore that stuff. It starts with basic role modeling, but where does it go from there? I mean, how do you, to me at least, it starts with, it's not so much I'm sitting there and saying, hey, Justin, hey, Jeremy, go connect with your friend, go talk to your friend, go shake hands, whatever. It's more them watching us do what we do, which is the difference, by the way, because I think when I was married, their mother was more direct about it and talking about it. And I was more of I just did my thing and I knew they were watching me kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and in fact, I haven't seen that well, actually, I have seen that with them when they're with their, for my sons, when they're with their drum corps friends. Um, they lead the way in that group with not just shaking hands or acknowledging people, but hugging each other. And if you guys know me, and Chad, we haven't been in the same room yet, but I'm a very huggy person. I hug everybody who like exists. So, and they grew up watching that stuff, and I brought that style. For me, it came out of the fact that my father was not a physically interactive person.
hmm
I remember hugging my father once, literally once. Now there are some pictures that show that he would hold me and was affectionate with me when I was a very small child, but I don't remember that stuff. Um, and then, as we've talked about a little bit in the show, he had a fairly major accident, not the one that took his life, but or before that, back in I won't say when it was, just say I was 4 years old at the time, and it changed the way he physically interacted with people.
hmm
Um, and so he was not a huggy person. He wasn't an affectionate person. He cared and he loved, but in a very different way that I can't even relate to very much. So I made a very conscious decision somewhere around college to be the exact opposite in that regard. I'm very much like him in some ways, but I'm the exact opposite in terms of physical affection. So not only do I hug my kids, and when I was married, I hugged my wife and all that, but I'm hugging everybody. And I took that style to my networking groups. And I could see people at first were sort of like, what's he doing? And then now everybody hugs everybody at my networking groups too. So it's not just my kids that are emulating. It's my whole, my community has seen the style that I lead the organization with, and they follow it. And the kids do the same thing. I never really said, hey, you guys, you should do this, you should do that. I just do it. And I think Dina, my former wife, was more of the let's talk about it. How do this is what I think you should do kind of thing.
Right.
That's a good point, right? So, I mean, when you mentioned this topic, a couple of things immediately popped to my mind. We talk about that. Um, when it comes to gender roles and things like that, obviously there's some historical precedent on how this stuff is approached, right? You know, the maternal is seen as more of a touchy-feely, caring type of person. The uh, father is more the strong, silent type. I may not express my stuff verbally, but I do things in a way that is more passive than active. Um, and it it's funny. I think back to with my folks. My mom was my mom was definitely the empathetic one, right? My dad was a little bit of the strong silent type, but like when he actually expresses emotions, it was pretty powerful, and he kind of softened a bit as he got older too.
Right.
He was different when I was younger than when I was older. Now, part of that might be, listen, your kids get to the point where they are now adults and you can relate to them differently, right? So that's probably part of it. Um, but it made me think about how I approached, my time, with my kids as they're growing up, right? So I've always been a very I I don't have a problem expressing my emotions. Like I'm totally cool with it. If I have to laugh, that's cool. If I have to cry, that's cool. I have no problem if my kids see that. For me, I'm a big believer in trying to be as genuine as you can, age appropriate, obviously. Um, there are certain things that I don't express because my kids are not age appropriate to enjoy them, right? Or that's fine. But to try to be, I've always felt that doing that um, provides a better example of being an actual genuine human for my kids.
Mhm.
Um, I've dealt with a lot of folks over the years, friends, associates, coworkers, passerby, whatever, that I don't know. I always got the feeling that they were scared to be their genuine selves,
Right.
for one reason or another. Now, sometimes that reason is completely justified. Not my call to make one way or the other. But I felt that for my kids, I wanted to, to kind of talk about what Keith was talking about, provide, if not explicit direction in it, more of an example to follow on honestly trying to be a genuine human. That's expressing yourself honestly. That's being direct with people and not being passive aggressive with folks. If you have a question, ask it. Don't assume somebody's going to just pick it up and do something for you without you initiating, you
Mhm.
know? Things like that. I think by learning those skills and hopefully teaching via example, it's stuff that my kids pick up on. I've had mixed success on that. You know,
Well,
my 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 youngest is emulates, I think, more his grandfather on his mom's side, a little bit of the strong silent type, very, academically advanced, but is he kind of keeps things close to the vest. My older son is probably more like me. Um, he can be well, he's very direct with others, but he's not always direct with himself. I get on him about that sometimes. But he feels more comfortable expressing himself like emotionally and things like that, which is very, very, very cool. But yeah, it's interesting to see how us as the leaders of this new generation and like for me parenting for my kids differed from the way it's like I tried to take the amalgam of both of my parents and merge them together because I think they gave me a really healthy background to have as a kind of a foundational basis for my kids.
Yeah, I would agree that that was kind of my experience too. I think both of my parents were very loving. My dad, he was kind of a hard ass and a tough guy, a farmer, and I've seen him just grab a cow by the nose. He probably weighed 180 pounds, just like take this 2,000 pound animal and do with it what he wants, right? I mean, he's just one of those guys. Carried a gun, most of the time, drank whiskey. But when it came to me, like he was out, like whenever I'd leave to go home, especially because again, my parents were divorced and I would go visit him, it'd always be hugs and kisses, right? Before I left. And there was something that really stuck with me about that, about he had no problem. He was man enough to do these other things and he was man enough to be who he was with me, which I think said a lot. Um, and was a great lesson for me. I think my mom also was always just very loving to me, kind of nurturing and everything. So, we've got that. And from an early age, I made the decision with Frankie. I'm gonna hug him whenever I want, whether he likes it or not. So, before I drop off at school, I'd be giving him a hug, and he'd be like, "Dad." I'm like, "Hey, I don't care. You're my son. You're my
Mhm.
baby. You're always gonna be my baby, no matter how old you are." Even now, I give the kid hugs when I see him. And I say he's a kid, but he's a grown man. He's 24 years old now.
Mhm.
And but I think there's a part of him that's embracing that as well and kind of sees what we have going on. But and I think that's not only like in the family, but with my friends too. I mean, you know we're very, very close. And I do anything for my closest friends. I had one call me and say, "Hey, I need some money." It was a pretty large amount. I'm like, "Give me the wiring instructions." There's like no questions asked, and that's, maybe that's not the emotive type of love, but it's like sacrificial. I'm like, "Yeah, what do you need, man?"
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was like that, and I still am to an extent. I'll tell you, um, I've noticed, especially the last surprise, 4 years, almost five. Um, for certain reasons, there's been some changes that have come to light. Um, I think you know why. Um, so I was the give your shirt off your back type forever. Um, and then it changed uh, because of certain influences in my life,
Mhm.
which I'm not proud of. But um, I think when it really started, probably 2022, I started to notice that part of it really coming back, of the aspect of who I am starting to come back. And um, I see it and I feel it, and it makes a huge difference in who I am that it's come back. Now, the interesting thing is, I mean, going to, I have two sets, and it's not a never the tween shall meet situation. It just I don't hang out with a certain group of my friends that much outside of certain situations. Just because it is what it is. My AA friends, I some of them I do, some of them I don't hang out, but we outside of meetings don't necessarily hang out that often.
Mhm.
Then I have the regular friends, um, and I notice especially with Delana, and I know why. Delana has two sets of friends,
Mhm.
and right now it's never the tween shall meet because part of it is Delana is, and it's really just one or two kids from camp and then her friends from school. Her friends from school, she's been around a long time. Kids from camp, it's really been, especially one in particular, it's been the last really year or two, and it's because she's going away for travel camp, which this year I want to be a freaking counselor with where she's going. Places she's going to Cleveland,
Mhm.
to Canton, to the NFL Hall of Fame,
Sweet.
Pro Football Hall of Fame, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame the same trip.
Nice trip.
They're also going to Vermont, to the Vermont Teddy Bear Factory, and Ben and Jerry's. Also going to Niagara Falls, New York,
Nice.
the New York side. So I
good trip.
Yeah.
very. There's like 4 or 5, and one she's gone like 4 days.
I was lucky
And
to go to the local rec center at the end of the street when I was younger.
Yeah, me too.
this camp is incredible, and they've been there. They both have been there for a while. Um, but yeah, Delana has two sets of friends, and now I'll get to a point where I'll bring something up that we all questioned at a great deal whether our kids would be able to adjust to the new norm, the new world, when for a year almost, our kids were on the internet, on Zoom, doing classes, doing their interactions with their friends. And I will tell you, I can speak for my kids because very close example, both of them adjusted very, very well, very, very easily. Delana, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and I went into her room and she was talking about math with somebody. It was clear it was math. And it turned out it was one of her friends from camp, Taylor. She was helping her with her math homework.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was like, then with Sadie, she is on FaceTime or whatever with two of her friends in particular. Maybe not even FaceTime. I don't know exactly what it is, but a lot, and hours at a time. And I think it's a good thing because, to an extent, while they're seeing them, it's something that I feel like may have been a lost art form. That's the ability to have conversation on the phone. Have an actual phone conversation. It's remarkable that for what we really question, it's in some cases it definitely isn't what we all feared. I think it's some, like I said, I can't speak for everybody, but many may have adjusted to it. Many of the young kids today may have adjusted pretty well to what we feared they wouldn't.
Adjusted or created, and I say that because I started the whole conversation by saying I very much so, and Dina to a certain extent, role modeled interaction, if you will.
Yeah.
We none of us role modeled Zoom. We didn't.
No,
so they kind of grabbed something that would make sense to them and created it, which being the old bastard that I am, I'm slowly but surely adjusting to and coming to terms with. But my frustration, you just talked about Delana talking to her camp friend, or her camp friend is probably in another, maybe even another state.
no, Lincroft.
Yeah.
Lincroft. She's only 20 minutes away.
But she's not, what I'm getting at is, I guess I have that frustration, particularly with Jeremy, who, I love my boys dearly, but Jeremy has these two friends, Brian and John from high school. And he never comes
Better
out.
in town.
He never comes out of the basement, and he's always online. And I keep saying to him, Brian and John are right here why don't you go see them? Why don't you actually spend time with them? And he's like, I do all the time, because he's seeing them on screen.
Yeah.
Even though they're 5 feet away.
Well,
See,
to
it's
that
inter-
point,
yeah. It's
I did
interesting.
not role model that.
So it's interesting because I know of what you speak. Paul hangs out with all of his friends on PlayStation and whatnot, right? He spends a lot of time talking smack with his friends through games and blah 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 blah. That's just how they interact, right? Jay tends to see more of his friends in person. He, like just last night, he got picked up his friend Dream and his girlfriend, like they picked him up, they went to the mall, they walked around, blah 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 blah, right? He's more of a personal, interactive type of person. That's how he works best. My daughter is, I guess, a mix of the two. She socializes a lot on VR chat and things like that, but also, I mean, she works, so she has to interact with people in real life at the tea shop and things like that. But when I think about online interactions and how we kind of worry. Look, today that's the norm, right? For kids to interact, they don't go outside as much, they don't play as much. I will say though, at least from my own personal experience, the seeds of that online only community where you only see people through the internet was born in my generation. My One of my best friends in the world um, used to chat on a program called CyberChat
Right.
back in the late 80s, using a dial-up modem, online forums, text-based, chatting with people, fandoms, and things like that. And still has friends that they have regular conversations with to this day that they've never met in person.
Mhm.
So, and think about the world that we grew up in terms of online communication, right? So, and it's evolved, right? There was a day when
Right.
pen pals was the thing. Everybody wrote
Yes.
letters to each other. You never saw these people in person, but you had a
Mhm.
great relationship, a very intimate relationship where you'd share details about your life with somebody that you've never seen in person.
Right.
You had pen pals. You had phone conversations at one point where you just have phone friends, people that you talk to on the phone and whatnot, right? I think I strongly believe that connections are connections. Obviously, when you speak in person, you can get some better body language context over what somebody's saying. It makes it a little easier to understand. Um, in a way, video chat kind of helps with that because you can see somebody's reaction. It's not all impersonal, like through type or phone or where you can't get the full picture. So video chat helps in that sense. But I mean, connections are connections. I totally get what you're talking about, Jay, with Delana having two sets of friends because I think she feels with those respective groups, she has multiple sides to her personality. I think we all do. I know I do.
Right. Sure.
Right? Certain sides of our personality we feel more comfortable sharing with certain targeted groups of people than others.
Mhm.
So I think it allows her to be able to express herself in different ways to different groups and be able to get the feedback that she needs. And I think that's good. I think when we try to be all things to all people is when we tend to lose ourselves.
Right. Right.
But it's interesting. I think we used to have growing up as well. I'm sure all of you engaged in it as well, just like the phone conversations, right? So maybe it wasn't text, maybe it wasn't video, but I'd be on the phone for an hour with my girlfriend, and my mom would be like, "Get off the phone. Somebody needs to use the phone now."
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, to a certain extent, we've had that non-face-to-face, that not in the same room type of communication, but it just has changed in form, and I think that's just where we are technologically. My preference is to have people in the same room. There's something about having that person there. And to your point, Dave, about the nonverbal communication, 80% of communication is nonverbal. So seeing how that person's standing, seeing how that person reacts,
Mm-hmm.
seeing, just hearing their breathing patterns change or whatever it is whenever you bring up a topic, is important. And I think that our ways of interacting have changed under technology in two ways. I think one thing is that it's very easy now for the so-called keyboard warrior to like take a pot shot at somebody and online, and this isn't necessarily friends, but this is just kind of social communication overall. But to take a pot shot and say, "Oh, well, you're a blah blah blah," and they wouldn't say that in the past because they would worry about getting poked in the nose, right?
Mm-hmm.
You just can't say the same things in person that somebody can say online. So I think we've had some of that bleed over. And then I think we've also had some of the technology bleed over into real life. For example, the other day, my son and I were talking about this. He says, now he says, some of these younger kids, he says, they speak in the text terms in real life. He says, so they'll be like, oh, that's real funny, LOL.
Yeah.
And then like I had a young lady at our coffee shop the other day. She goes, "Oh," and I can't remember what she said, but then she goes, "JK," and I go, "JK," and she goes, "Oh, just kidding."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I mean, I think it's starting to impact both areas. And of course, I like to say I'm an old timer, but maybe somebody would say I'm a grandpa. I don't know, but
Get off my
my
lawn.
preference. My preference is the face-to-face
Go put your
communication.
teeth back in. I don't want to hear.
I mean, the American lexicon is always evolving and changing, right?
Oh yeah, it
It did.
is.
I mean, There are things, I mean, I was just seeing something online about, how each generation has their own buzzwords and things that, like, the generation before, like, I have no idea what you're saying. Like, speak English. I'm like, I'm speaking the English of my peers.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, no, it's I totally had another point and I don't remember what it is, so I'm hoping it comes back.
Yeah,
Um,
you mentioned something a little while ago that I actually have started to do the same thing. I use when I text, I voice text almost all the time because I'm lazy. I don't want to use my thumbs.
yeah.
So I'll record it using voice. Um, and I sometimes forget because when I'm voice texting, I'll be like, going to the store, period. I'll be back around 3 p.m. Exclamation point, something like that, in order for it
Yeah.
to hear it. And then I'll do like a voice recording for my friends, like my friend in Israel or something like that, on WhatsApp. And I'm recording my voice, and I'll start doing the same thing. I'll forget that I'm not, I'm in the wrong mode, if you will.
That's funny. That's funny.
Dictating a voicemail.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, bringing it back around to how we use that to, kind of encourage connections, for amongst our kids with their friends. I think that's part of it, right? So we can set some examples, I think, as parents and kind of the foundational pieces, you know, um, to allow our kids to try kind of be their genuine selves. I mean, I know that's something like I said earlier, that's something my parents tried to express in me. Some lessons I learned from them, some lessons I had to learn myself. Like my favorite uh, big word that starts with a B, and that's boundaries. Um, how to use those with people that you love, how to use those with people that you don't love, um, how to use those to maintain a sense of self and not lose yourself to somebody or something else, right? And that can be, like I said, that can be a thing amongst people that you care about very, very, very deeply. You still have to be able to kind of set boundaries around, whatever topic it is that you're doing. I mean, Jay, you were talking about earlier how, there was a time in your life that you would just give the shirt off of your back to anybody, no matter what. And there are times that, like that's totally applicable and admirable, but there are times that that can be self-defeating,
Yeah.
and it's hard to learn the context of when that's good and when that's not, and I see my kids, like with their friends, look, they've fallen into that same thing. Especially my oldest has done that as well, sacrificing herself because she feels that she needs to be there for her friends or her peers, but
Right.
not necessarily in a way that is good for her. Like, you don't
Right.
want to seem selfish,
Mhm.
but you also don't want to lose yourself to selflessness. And
Mhm.
that's a hard balance to figure out. I'm trying to kind of work. That's something I didn't get really as much from my parents. They had no idea about any of that stuff.
Right.
Um, but I'm trying to hopefully give some guidelines to my kids when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah, I had an experience when I was growing up. I think I was 6 years old, and I barely remember. So my mom has to tell me had told me the story. But there was a kid in my neighborhood named Fred, and Fred was a couple years older than I was, and he would want my lunch money and stuff like that, and I would give it to him, and he would say, "Oh, give me your lunch money. I'll be your friend." And I did. And then my mom was like, "What are you doing? He's not your friend. He's a bully." And I'm apparently I said to her, "Fred, that son of a bitch." But I learned early, don't don't give
Yeah,
anything, don't trust
yeah.
anybody because of Fred. But I guess maybe that was a good lesson. Thanks, Fred. But I think that is a tough, once your friends get settled, because I think for me, we moved around quite a bit, and I had a lot of different friends, but now I've got a group that I've been with these guys for 40, 50 years, or close to 50 years. And
Hmm.
those are the guys that I'm real close to. Like one of them, we had a business together. I never had a thought that he did anything wrong with the checking, or that he was taking money, or any of this stuff. Never checked it. And I think he felt the same way about me. And I've got others that, we're always trying to help each other, and it's just like a deep trust that, like, you can't just have in a few years. It's a trust that's been there for life. And You know, you do everything you can for them. And, you know, I think another piece is, you know, we're talking about communication, we're talking about kind of how you interact with people, but I think also just like picking the friends, how that operates, because I think some of that, you know, to my earlier point about, sorry, about Fred, you know, that was not a good situation. But I think, you know, having raised boys and girls, that boys are much easier to have to identify when they have friends versus girls. I will say that with Frankie, you know, I don't know that I ever gave him. I mean, I think you know, to Keith's point, we role model, but I also was like teaching him how to shake hands and kind of going through the etiquette stuff, kind
Mhm.
of the basics. But he also he mainly had his friendship groups by himself.
Right.
But
Right.
then my stepdaughter at the time, she like it was just like a never ending, you know, it was just like always every day there was a problem with some girl that was one of her friends, and just like seeing the way that they interacted, I'm like, this just is not healthy. And it was hard to give her good advice. I mean, just like everything at that time as a teenager was difficult. It was very difficult. I mean, it's just, and I don't, you know, my observation was that girls don't treat each other very nicely.
Thank you
No.
for reminding me.
Boys are just like,
Happy I
hey,
don't have
bro,
girls.
hey,
My
bro, I
thank
got
you
a
for
problem. Let's duke it out and be friends again. But I think
Yeah.
girls just get in this thing and they just stay there.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. I can speak of that from personal parenting experience, having one of each and having a a daughter that that definitely dealt with some harsh peer stuff amongst her group because my daughter especially amongst those that she socialized with, you know, the thing with girls is, you know, I feel that there's a certain standard that peer groups need to be able to keep and maintain, and if you fall outside of that standard in some way, shape, or form, you're mocked and or ostracized and or treated as an other. Um, my daughter is like 6'4", right? I mean, again, I don't know where she gets it from, but she's on the tall side. Uh, and one of the challenges of that, and I told her this pretty much like from the time she was very young, all growing up, is like, listen, there's a very good chance, you know, when she was young, I was like, there's a very good chance you're going to be on the tall side. You're going to stick out from the crowd. It's just, it's going to happen. Her mom is like 5'9", I'm 6'7", so yeah. Um, and you know, when that happens, and it's, I think something like that is a lot harder for girls because girls aren't meant to be that tall. They're meant to be kind of tiny and petite, and you know, you in pretty packages and all that other crap. I was like, so it was tough socializing and kind of being. She had a really hard time accepting who and what she was because she stood so far outside of the norm that developing that self confidence in who and what she was. She couldn't blend in with the crowd. I say all the time, like I cannot be incognito in a crowd. It's impossible. And I said the same thing to her. Like, you are not going to be able to be incognito in a crowd. You can try to like kind of slouch over and like, you know, like not stand tall and like pretend that you're, you know, kind of smaller and look all awkward and stuff. Or hopefully you can get to the point where if you want to wear 4-inch heels, go for it. Because, you know, just own who and what you are. That's a lot harder, I think, for young girls to come to terms with and be able to get to the point of. I mean, heck, even my current spouse has trouble with that, you know. And yeah,
Mhm.
I know of what you speak.
Thank you. I was saying earlier, thank you for reminding me that I don't have girls. It's more challenging. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, sorry, Jay.
My life was easier without. Jason's like, fuck you, just fuck.
Um, Chad mentioned the buzzword trust. Ironically, there was when I was at I had a thing assembly for AA yesterday, and one of the town hall part of it, that was a big topic, was trust. And not my strong suit for a long time.
Mhm.
Um, struggle with it for a while. Still struggle with it to a point. Not going to get into why, but one of the interesting things that has happened over the last couple of years, last year and like 3 months at this point, was the trust and faith someone had kind of randomly it started. I mean, obviously she had a thought long time before it even came out of her mouth. Um, the area literature chair, the previous one, um, said in October of 23, said somebody came to her and said, "So what's next in 25?" And in January 25, next January. And she said, "Well, I hope Jason will take over. Jason will take over literature." And I looked at her, and I said, "Jason's going to do what?" There's never a conversation like it had never even crossed my mind, never came out of her mouth. And then she said, "What do you think?" And I went, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "You're serious?" She's like, "Yeah." Well, her thought, it came to light that it was becoming obvious that it was going to happen. And by the time everything was announced, it was probably one of the worst kept secrets in the area in RAA group. That was like the worst kept secret. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone knew that it was coming. And we did this assembly, and I just sent the square statement for yesterday over to our area treasurer, and I'm looking at that square statement, and I know what there was, how much we sold, and it was on a very limited uh, amount of literature that we even had. But I had to pull stuff in from other sources because we were wiped out, and we just couldn't get it back up enough
Mhm.
to fulfill what we had. Or I thought we weren't going to be able to get it, but for limited inventory, we sold $1,400 worth of in about 4 hours, 5 hours, really. Um, and I said to one of my things was I mentioned how the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and if it wasn't for the literature team that I have around me, this isn't working. So I said, they've laid the trust, and it's got a couple, two or three of them that have been with me, around me for the last 2 years as I was the district chair. And yesterday, I mean, the one thing I almost said was,
Did he freeze?
through this program, I've learned how to trust people and things like that. Like I said, not the easiest thing for me to do, but um, it's been, an interesting couple of months, interesting couple of years. So trust, like I said, hard, but it is what it is at this point.
Jason, you bring up something very interesting, and if I'm digging into a place that I shouldn't, I'm just tell me to shut up. But when you develop the relationship with your kids when they're very young, and you're role modeling certain things, you're role modeling affection for others and how to interact with others and what have you. There's sort of what society calls a normal progression. When your kids were in their single digits, and for Sadie, early single digits, do you feel like you were not able to role model the way you would have wanted to because other things were happening for you?
It's a good point.
I mean, you were going through some tough times back then, so um, I, I mean, I've seen those girls not very recently, but enough to know that they've developed pretty damn well. They're stellar. But was more of the role modeling perhaps coming from Elise instead of you because you might have been preoccupied
Even with Sadie, even in that state, um, more so now um, than then, more so now than 4 years ago.
Mhm.
I'm the common influence on her, but I've been the common influence on her for a long time. Going to be 11 next week. This week, 24th. She's good. Yes, I know. She's gonna be 11 on the 24th. He's like, God damn it. Yes, she's gonna be 11 this week. What happened? I know, right? And Delena's gonna be 14.
I don't even
in
want to
March.
hear this.
No, I've been the calming influence on Sadie. I've been sober for almost 5 years now, and longer than that, I've been the calming influence on Sadie. And I will say that Sadie, as you guys know, not big, only partly because of my issues. Say probably very small amount of because of the issues that I had. Sadie was in therapy for a while. You know that. I
Mhm.
I don't hide that. She is, I guess, if you want to call it, graduated from it. A couple of weeks ago, a couple months ago, like actually over a month ago, maybe a little more. She graduated from it, and the meltdowns have been very few and far between. Recently, I got a text while I was at the thing yesterday at the assembly, and at least having a rough day with Sadie. So okay, they didn't call me. I came home, um, but I will say more so now than, especially, I've noticed it more and more the last couple of weeks where not always, but more often than not, I'm met at the door. And it's not by the dog.
Mhm.
If she's home, I'm met at the door, or within a couple minute or two, met in the kitchen by Sadie. So, um, a lot is, like I said, definitely changed, but with what I was going through, I would say that to an extent, I would say that, I mean, they both have parts of both of us. And even in my altered state, there are things that I see that, and fortunately, at least for now, it's all positive things that I see in that I saw in myself in them. So, not as much as you would think, to answer your question. I think that the mixed influence is, it's kind of, it's not 50-50, but there's more I'm realizing every day there's more than I know.
So
For
I,
sure.
Yeah.
I point out your that you might have gone through some challenges with how the kids would develop based on what they saw with you. But in some ways, the three of us are no different because we didn't go through that. We went through divorce. And
Mhm.
speaking only for myself, I certainly was not role modeling warm relationships with my wife for my sons to watch. In fact, it has been a topic that I have really bantered over from myself and with my friends about. It's a miracle that Justin had a very affectionate 7-year relationship with a woman. That's in the past now, and Jeremy had a 6-year one. Same thing. And I look back and I'm like, I'm not even sure who taught them that because they didn't see much of Dina and I being affectionate with each other because the marriage was pretty bad for a while before in the latter years, in their formative years, they didn't see very much of that. So it's not just, Jason, what you might have gone through. We all have some things that may impact in a negative way the ability to teach and role model how to develop relationships with your peers. I just, like I said, speaking for myself, I was very worried for quite some time that I had totally screwed my kids up because of that. And I'm not exactly convinced that I haven't yet, but they seem to have done pretty well so far.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that there's tough times, and it's just not a good time for the adults, and I think that reflects on things in the children. But I think I think kids are very resilient, and they can learn from what they see, and kind of and take in other information from other sources, and hopefully interpolate it to know why it happened, what was happening, and to be be able to have a normal relationship with someone. I mean, because
Yeah.
that's one thing I've seen too, is just like, but I go, I feel like my son's a much better, kind of person for a relationship than I am,
You know,
just by the things that he does.
it's funny because like one of the key words that you mentioned, Jay, and I think it's an important one. And as a parent, teaching the embrace of this word is probably one of the hardest things that we do, and that's the word trust,
Right.
right? So there's a lot of stuff that goes with that. To this day with my kids, we basically go through. I try to go through three different stages. I start out with implicit trust.
Right.
I will do what you're going to do. I'm going to trust that you are going to find a way to do it because you think differently than I do. I can't walk you through every step of the process because you do things differently than me. So show me the results, and I'm going to trust that you'll figure that out.
Mhm.
If that doesn't work, which as parents we know it often doesn't, I move to trust but verify. So
Right.
I'm going to trust that you're going to take care of this, but now I need to take additional steps to verify that things are happening in the way that they need to be done. The next step is verify first before any trust is going on. And that's, I don't want my kids being there. Um, but I think that methodology helps not just for like getting work done around the house or doing homework or waking up to your alarm or some stupid stuff like that. Honestly, it's a big part of relationships too, whether with
Yeah.
their friends or with respective love interests or things like that. Like Keith mentioned, one of the experiences that I had, and it kind of mirrors what I've had, especially in my prior marriage and in my divorce proceedings, is that I started out with an implicit trust there. I have since now moved very, very firmly in a lot of ways to trust but verify. Um,
Right.
some
Right.
people call that being gun shy. Some people call that, it's more of a factor of trying to move from the naivete of a lack of prior experience, using prior experience to set future expectations. And that's hard to break.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's really hard to reestablish that implicit trust once it's gone in some way, shape, or form. And trying to teach my kids to go that path when my trust experience was broken, but still teach them that they can do it has been hard.
I
Trust is
could
one of
not
those things
agree
that's
more.
very, very hard. I think it's very
Yeah.
difficult. It takes time, it takes experience, it takes interaction with the people who you're trying to develop it with. So I understand. I mean, it's just like I would say in reality, there are very few people who I mean, here's the other piece, I guess, is that trust has different kind of levels. Like some people I go, oh, do I trust somebody at work to do this? Yeah, I trust somebody. But then when you have a relationship or when you have your kids, that's a much deeper level of trust, with
Yeah.
somebody. So it has levels to it, but I certainly understand that.
Yeah. And honestly, that includes a relationship with yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah, man.
Mute.
That's
Mute,
the
dickhead.
hard to overcome for sure for me because
Yeah.
I find it easier to rebuild relationships and trust with others than I do with myself because I don't trust my judgment.
Hmm. Yeah. You were saying, Jay?
I said mute, dickhead.
Well,
We could trust that.
there are things in the background that I'm trying to keep out of podcast.
I noticed, but I'm like,
Did anybody say Linda? Oh my goodness.
Cool.
I think that might be a pretty good place to leave it off for the week.
Yeah, man.
We opened the door, I think, and it's something that we'll discuss. I'll put up this week. I think like I said, I think we opened the door here. We dabbled into communication as opposed to communications. Obviously, I mean, we can explore that difference. But we dabbled into communication and cues and things like that. So, I mean, if that's what we're going to run with, I'll post something from a movie that came out called The Interrogator quite a while ago, and there's a very, very interesting. I think it's like a minute clip from that movie where they get into communication and they're basically talking about IQs and things like that. It's kind of like I said, I think it'll be a very interesting topic to explore for us next week. Anybody have anything they want to add before we get out of here?
I think that's a perfect thing that you should be contributing here, Joe, because Dave is in San Juan. I'm in the Rocky Mountains, as you can see. Chad is in San Francisco, and you're on the interrogation couch. That's perfect.
Brilliant. Awesome.
Good timing.
So, from all of us here at Dad's on Life, take care, everybody. And of course, Keith,
Yes, sir.
eat my shirts.
Chomp chomp, baby.
Have a good one, guys.
Later on.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.